Hello and welcome. I am Kara, aka Clefairy Creations, and today we're going to be doing a watercolor painting for an easy beginner landscape. Now, if you are picking up paint for the first time, or if you just want to do something that is a little bit less mind intensive and you've been painting for a long time, this is perfect for either of those. We are first going to start out, and I'll list on the screen steps for what we're working on, but we're first going to start out with a sky and land blocking color. I like to do these colors because it gives us a good foundation. It takes away from just like the pure blankness of the canvas, and it really allows us to kind of open our mind to deciding what we want to put. I'm going to be using koi watercolors today, as well as just some various brushes and brush sizes. I got these in a pack. Any type of brushes you have should be able to do. These are all basically round brushes. And so, sometimes I don't even switch between them. I just have them in case I want them. So you can use whatever brush you have. Just make sure that it feels loose on the bristles and it doesn't feel caked with different types of paint. I often see that people with acrylic painting, people who do acrylic paintings a lot, they have some caked on paint down here, and so it makes it really rough. These I just used for watercolor. Again, you can use whatever you would like. It's gonna turn out great, I promise. All right, so with that, let's get started. An easy way to get watercolor paint onto a surface initially is to go ahead and just wet it with some clean water. I'm using a size, I don't know, this is size 12, a 12 round brush. I got these in a pack at Michael's, so I don't have a link or anything for them, but they were on sale and I thought they were nice. So we're just going to do a nice simple coating of water up at the top of the page here. This is where we're going to put our blue for our blue sky. There's no right or wrong way to do this. You're just going to pick out a light blue. I want my landscape to be during the daytime, so I'm probably going to lean towards this blue or this blue just because they have more of that light blue pigment to them. If you want to make yours at nighttime, or maybe it's like the sunrise, you may combine a few different colors to get that full effect. I'm going to put this on a palette here, and I'm going to bring more water to this pigment, and you can see how immediately it's very loose. It's almost a lighter blue color than what we just put on here. Water does that with watercolor. I know it sounds probably redundant, but water is important in watercolor because it allows you to do those things where you can just mix in more water and get a lighter shade, a lighter hue of that color. So I'm going to go ahead and just brush this on right where we just laid down that water. And I'm going to bring more water to this and apply it again. And if you feel like your paper is curling, this is watercolor paper. No matter what paper you use, as soon as you apply any water to it, it will just end up curling. That's just what paper does. Eventually it'll lay flat. If you want to prevent that, you can get some masking tape or washi tape and put it along the border of your piece. It also gives it a nice finished border. I just didn't do that today, but you totally could do that if you wanted to make it just more stable. And I'm going to bring this sky about halfway down, so I may need to apply more water. And if your paper starts to dry out and you're getting more pigmented lines in certain areas, just add more water. I promise it'll be okay. I'm going to do a little bit more pigment. So when you have about halfway of your painting with your sky, I'm going to add a little bit more pigment, And we're gonna make the top of it a little bit darker. It's gonna give us a nice gradient going downwards. And I'm just making simple strokes back and forth, no fancy technique or anything, just back and forth, back and forth. It's almost it's almost like hypnotizing yourself. Back and forth, back and forth. There we go. And I'm just gonna do this until I feel like I have a nice gradient of somewhat a darker color up top of blue all the way down to my horizon. And I'll stop there. Again, if you're doing a sunset or a sunrise, maybe you're doing nighttime, you're going to be using different colors for this. Specifically for the sunrise and sunset, as you go from top to middle, you may have a very concentrated purple or blue up at the top, and then slightly go downwards, adding in pinks and oranges and yellows. I'll do a separate video where we have a sunset landscape, and so you'll be able to see that. But just an idea of if that's what you want to do, you'll have this gradient be just a little bit different. Okay, so now we're going to be working on the actual landscape part of our color blocking or foundation layer. We've already done the sky, easy peasy, we're good to go. So for this bottom part, I'm going to have a bunch of greenery. So I'm going to take a green from my watercolor palette or whatever you may be using. You can also use gouache and acrylic for this. They will have a little bit different behavior in terms of layering, but you can totally do that. I also already had kind of a green leftover block here. With watercolors, this is very nice because when you have your palette that may already have some pigment on it, to reactivate it, all you have to do is add water. And so I do this if I feel like I may be using that color again soon. If not, I will clean it in a sink and wipe it off with a paper towel. I didn't do it this time, and here we go, I have some green. So same idea like we did with the sky. We're going to go swiping left and right. And again, with this, you could add just some water so that it goes easier onto your page. I forgot to do that, so mine ended up stopping pretty quickly, but let me go ahead and put down a little bit of water. This, if it is one of your first times painting, this is called a wet on wet technique, meaning that we are putting water down onto the canvas before actually applying our pigment. Ideally, you do this with clear water. I forgot, so mine's a little bit green, but that's okay. It will work the same. So now I have picked up just a little bit of my green, and I'm gonna go back over this area with my brush, again, going back and forth. This time, I'm not doing as much of a gradient like I was with my sky. Instead, I'm leaving areas of lighter and areas of darker green color so that I get some variation within my landscape. If I made this just one block color, that's also okay because we're gonna layer over this and we're going to put things in here. I have us doing a couple different grasses, a little shrub, maybe some trees. So it's okay if it's all the same. We're gonna go back over it anyway. I just like to block out those lighter parts so that I can visualize it a little bit better if I wanna put maybe more grasses in that area, or if I wanna layer it with some trees, I can do that too. So either way is fine. I'm gonna put a little bit more down here at the bottom with my brush. And again, if you do have yours taped down, this process is a little bit easier to hold on to and kind of get a more even brush stroke across. Mine is not taped down, so I did not do that. But as you can see, as I'm going across, I just have some area lines that are darker and then some sections that are lighter. And I'm going to use those to put in my next features. So we are officially done with our foundation layer. Our first feature that I'm going to put in after finishing this foundation layer is a row of trees. We're going to do a full row of trees across our horizon in a very small perspective. So we're going to have them kind of pushed back like we are looking into the distance and we see these trees. So they're not going to be very detailed at all. We're going to do a little trick with our brush. I did change brush sizes. So I was at a size 12, now I'm at a size 8 round brush. So to start these trees back here on our horizon, I'm going to take a slightly darker color than I was working with on the initial landscape. I can still use the well that had that green on it because it's not going to affect it at all, so you don't have to go ahead and clean that out. You can just take a darker green color. I'm picking kind of a blue green. You could go with more of like an army green, or you can mix some brown in with your green if you have a lot of it already on your palette. Any of those work. So I'm just going to put this here. Now we're not going to add a lot of water to this because I want it to be fairly concentrated since I need this, I want this at least, this horizon tree line to be, you know, just a darker color, more pigmented. It's darker because we're looking at it into the background, into that horizon. So that's the reason we're not watering it down a whole lot. So for this, I said that it's not going to be very detailed at all, and the only part we really should be able to make out is the tops of those trees. So that's why I'm working with this brown brush, is because you can see it has a very good point here on it. So when I'm creating that tree, I can just simply lay down my brush and there I have the tree. And you can do this with a couple different size brushes if you want, or you can keep with the same brush. It's not going to make a huge difference. But I'm just kind of laying these down and I'm not putting pressure on it. I'm just simply letting my brush take. And see, I even added maybe a little bit. I did actually add pressure to that one, and I didn't mean to. It's all good though. Because again, if you look at these and you're like, I don't really like how I organize them, we're going to go back and layer over them anyway. So it's not that big of a deal if you see this and you're like, not a huge fan of how I put those. I clumped them too close together. I made them too big. It's okay. We're gonna have layers over them, so they're not gonna be the most prominent thing in our landscape. They're just gonna give us a nice background horizon, a little bit of an interest point back here for our true kind of foreground that we'll create. So this is our background currently that we're plopping down, and there we go. And that's basically all you have to do for your trees in the background. And now we move on to the next part. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is create some closer looking grasses and shrubs. So I'm gonna kind of have a line that curves all the way over through this bottom part of the canvas. So we're gonna start in this left kind of quadrant area, and we're gonna move kind of like a curvy L, or however you want to think of it, over and to the right. So we're not gonna go into the horizon. We're going to stop about maybe ½ an inch down from that. And these are going to be the closest things to us. So we are going to add just a little bit detail to those. So again, taking my palette I don't need to clean this. I can still use this green, but I am gonna add a couple of extra colors to it. Since my green is fairly dark, I'm gonna take a yellow. This is probably more of a medium yellow color, and my watercolors are not perfectly clean at all. So it already had a little bit of green in it. And I'm gonna put that right into this well where we already have this other green pigment. And this also helps bring your piece together. If you're just layering in with colors that you've already used, it's gonna look a lot better. It's gonna look more natural actually than if you just took singular colors from your palette every time. Mixing them like this, it just helps give a natural feel to it. So like I said, we're gonna start, let me put this over here. We're gonna start down here in this left quadrant area, and I'm just gonna start by swooping my brush up and down. So we're going verticals here like we did with the tree. And so I can swoop up, I can swoop down. It does not matter. Change it up. It gives it a better texture anyway. So we're gonna do this, and we're gonna lay these, we're gonna make these probably, I would say 2 or 3 times bigger than the trees that we put in there. So you can see that it is a lot longer than the trees we have on the horizon. And again, we're gonna go in that L shape. So I'm just gonna do this repeatedly until I have enough that helps to make up that L shape. There's no rule on how many you need to put or how you need to space them out. I'm just alternating kind of what I'm putting on the page here. There we go. And so we have a nice line now to where we can put more detailed parts of our landscape on our page here. And one thing we need to do as well is kind of have this go down towards us. So we had it go off the page on this right side. We also need to see it go off the page down here in this bottom left. So go ahead, if you haven't already done that, go ahead and do it. And then with this, I can add really whatever I want. If I want to add flowers, I can add some flowers here. If I want to add like a little bit, some bushes, or just maybe I want to keep it grass. It's totally up to you. I'm going to add a couple of shrubs, and I'm going to change the color up as I do that. So I'm grabbing more of my yellow that I used originally, and I'm going to put it into the palette again. And actually, I want a little bit more yellow than that even. So I'm going to grab just a little bit more. There we go. So with this new color, I'm going to create a shrub. Now, there's a couple ways to do this. Mine is just basically like a bunch of tall grass that came together and now it looks like a shrub. That's kind of what I have pictured. But you can do this a lot of different ways. So I'm gonna initially kind of put it on the page. A good way to test color too, if you're not 100% sure with it, is just to kind of blend it in with whatever you've already put on there. I like this color, it's different enough. So I'm gonna go ahead and to create this shrub, I'm going to pack it full of these lines. We're gonna pack it all together here. Maybe we have some going off to the sides. We have some that are much taller, some that are just kind of shorter in there. And there you go. That is our shrub. I'm gonna do that a couple of times over the landscape so that we have a few of them here. And I can go down into here. So let's say I have one that maybe is somewhere in here. I can go ahead and do that same process. So we are bunching these lines that we did to make the original grasses together, and we're using them now to create this shrub. There we go. And there's no rules on how big or small you need to make this. It's just however your lines fall. There you go, there's our second shrub. Another thing that I want to put in here is a couple of textured pieces to give it, like, you know, this bottom layer. Here we have fairly tall grasses going on. I also want to give some textured layer to grass below. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this kind of darker. Think of like the dirt that you would find underneath some grasses. So I'm going to take maybe this is more of a brick or like red dirt color. I'm going to take that. I'm not going to put it in my green because I still want to use my green color. So I'm going to move to another well, get some water, activate it. I did have a little bit of brown in this well originally, so that's why I went ahead and put it in there. You can choose a clean well. If you have one that has red in it, that's probably okay too. Mixing colors is never a bad idea. All right, and so if I want this to be the ground level, I'm gonna stop my vertical. I'm gonna now go horizontal. So to give the effect that this is some dirt coming through grass, I'm gonna go horizontal into the area. And I can make small movements, I can make large movements with my brush. It'll come together if it looks weird, if it looks like you put too much or you have like too little of lines. Just keep going with it and mixing it in until you find like a good balance within it. And again, if you feel it's too dark, add water. Water is the like white paint for watercolor. So if you're like an acrylic painter, I'm a big acrylic painter, so I would normally just add some white to this to get it to lighten up, but that is not necessarily how watercolor works. There we go, we got some dirt laid in here now. And then I can do this far back too, like I don't have to just have it here in my foreground. I can put it back. Now, just as a note, darker colors will always seem closer. So if you're gonna put it in the background, you really need this to be fairly light in color. So I can go ahead and just kind of put some of this back here, but it does need to be that lighter color so that it looks like we're going back into the horizon instead of trying to have it join us here in the foreground area that we're closest to. All right, there we go. All right, so now that I have some big features here, I'm gonna go in and add in just some subtle features. So some smaller grasses, maybe like a little flower, a little shrub, whatever I'm feeling, in areas that we haven't already marked. And again, I'm gonna use a pretty light touch here, especially as I go back into that horizon, because we don't want a ton of color back there. And I'm actually gonna bring this one up just a little bit. And you may add in a little bit extra green. So mine's a little too yellowy right now. So I'm gonna add in just a little extra green here and put it into these grasses. Maybe give them a little bit more defined of an area here in my foreground. There we go. So again, no wrong way to do this, just however your lines feel on the page, or on the canvas, I should say. There we go. Really keeping it light touches back here in the horizon area as we go back. Like even on this right side, I probably did a little bit too much, but It's all good. There we go. And if you want to add some flowers that are not, you know, super detailed, what you can do. So let's say I want to do maybe a yellowy, maybe like an orange. Here, I'll do like kind of an orangey color. There we go. So I'm gonna pick up some orange. Let's say I have some flowers right here. All you're gonna do is plop some of that color down. Let it be abstract. Don't feel like you need to perfectly put in some petals or anything like that. Just let it be kind of abstract here. And if you want smaller flowers in the background, you're just gonna do little tiny dots for those. So we're not even gonna put full brush strokes like we do here at the foreground area. Instead, we just do little tiny dots. There we go. There's some easy flowers. Okay, and so the last thing we're gonna do, and this is optional, if you wanna stop here, you can stop here. The last thing we're gonna do is add in a few tree branches coming in from the sides of the pages. And this will go into our horizon. So I'm picking up some darker pigmented brown here. So I'm getting kind of a chocolatey brown. And I do want this pretty pigmented because we're gonna go over a couple of the layers we've already put in. And watercolor is very transparent when it goes on the page. So you may have to do this a couple of times. So I'm gonna start on the left side here. I'm gonna take a branch that's actually above my horizon and I'm gonna swoop it over the page a little bit. And we're gonna have the branches really kind of going outwards. And I might, let's see, might even have, well, let's see how this goes here. So I'm gonna swoop and go like that. So swoop, horizontal, and then upwards. And when I get here, I could keep going, or I could stop and just add in just like a few little branches here, maybe going upwards, maybe going downwards, however you want it to go. So we're gonna do that. And I'm gonna go over this just like one more time after washing my brush off and then dipping it back into the pigment. And you can see we're getting some of that darker color here. Luckily, my sky is fairly bright, so this is a lot, you know, easier to put on the page. But if yours is not, you may have to do it a couple of times. And then I'm also gonna have a branch kind of going downwards like this. So we're having just a little bit of a tree saying hello, entering our page here. No worries if it's not perfectly covering up things. Just keep going over it a couple of times and I promise it will. And then from here, we are gonna make some, there we go. From here, we are gonna make some leaves, or the appearance of some leaves. We're gonna give like a little like, there are leaves here, but we're not going to make them super detailed. So this is our main branch that we're gonna come off of. We're gonna pretend we have a little bit of branches up here too. So I'm just gonna kind of swoop in my brush just a little bit, leaving gaps in between. There we go. And I did add a different color green. So I added this kind of, it's almost like a matte green. It's like an army green. And I just went ahead and mixed it in with whatever I already had in that well. And I'm just gonna continue to swoop here a little bit with these with my brush, just swooping back and forth. It's almost like you're writing a C. So write a C backwards and forwards, and eventually you'll get what looks like some leaves on top of your branches. And if it does mix in with the branch color a little bit, no worries. Watercolors do that. If you want it not to do that, you can just like go ahead and wait for this to dry, or use like a little bit of a like a force to dry, like a hair dryer or something like that. All right, there we go. And I did go down into my horizon a little bit here. So I covered it up a little bit with this green, and I also went into a little bit of my shrubbery down here, just to kind of bring it all together. And lastly, we're gonna do the same thing on this right side. So again, taking that tree color, that branch color I had, you may need to add even more pigment depending on how much you put in your well the first time. That should be good. And I'm not gonna do the exact same shape because I want this to be independent of the tree branch that we put over here. And I'm not even gonna make it, I think, as big, but I am gonna make just some, let's say like some little branches over here. Again, if you're going over some already layered down colors, you may have to do this a couple times, bring in more pigment to truly cover that area up just a little bit. But I'm gonna do this just like a few times with my brown, almost like how we did the grass. So I'm making these a lot less, I'm making it a lot less thick than I did on this side for reference. I think I'm gonna do like one more, maybe like coming down from the top here, pointed down. And you know, trees don't always just like go up and down, and you know, they go in some crazy directions. So get creative with how you want to lay your branches. There's no rules. So I'm gonna call that good on my branches for that side. And now I'm gonna mix together again some of that army green into my well here. There we go, that should be good. Actually, I think I'm gonna water that down a little bit because this is a fairly light area again. And again, we're just gonna go in with doing some of those C's backwards and forwards, leaving a lot of space in between them. We don't need to put in every single leaf we may have. We just are looking to get the idea that we have a bunch of leaves there. And you can go in with different colors if you want. I'm just gonna use this color because I like it. And then down here at the horizon, I might even put in a little bit darker of a color just so I can, you know, kind of get the effect of them going over the horizon. There we go. All right. And that is our other side of the tree. All right. And then last feature that we're gonna put in is I'm going to do a little lake here in the middle. There have been a couple of times here where if you like it and you wanna stop and you wanna keep it like this, absolutely, you totally can. I'm just gonna show you another feature that you can put into your painting. Now, since we're gonna make this lake, I'm gonna make it just a bit darker because water that has depth to it is just gonna appear a bit darker. So it is gonna be a slightly bluer area than just our sky. So I'm gonna take, plus it's gonna mix in with what we've already put there, being that green color. So I got some blue and I'm just gonna mark out with it kind of where I want my water to fall. This isn't gonna be a huge lake for me. This is just gonna be kind of like a little pond actually that you might find out in like a random spot in the country, you know, like just kind of doing that. And I'm just gonna bring these lines together, leaving a little bit of space there. If I want, I'm gonna extend it almost to this other tree. And making these horizontal lines, do not go vertically with these lines because it's gonna end up looking kind of weird if you do. It's okay if you're also going over some grassy area. It's totally good. And I might do this just one more time, bringing in some darker areas. So maybe this left side is a bit darker water. Maybe it's shaded a bit more. And leaving some lighter areas, kind of like what I did with my grass. This also allows us to kind of see maybe the banks of the pond and see where that line is, that heavy line that would signify that's where the pond stops. There we go. And just like that, we are finished with our piece. Now, are there like 50 other things I could do to this? Absolutely. But keeping it simple, keeping it, you know, as a easy, either like landscape painting for those of you who have done paintings before, or maybe it's your first painting as an artist and you just don't want to feel any more overwhelmed. Maybe you already have. So this is great. So again, if yours does not look exactly like mine, that's totally fine. It doesn't need to. But I'm very, very happy that and grateful that I got to share doing some art with you today. So if you feel like you want to share your art with me, feel free to tag me wherever you post it. I have Instagram, I have Pinterest, at Clefairy Creations for all of the social media. And I will see you all back next Friday for another video. Happy creating, everyone!